What's up, everyone? Today we got Miss Jennifer from the Peaceful Press. She's a homeschool mom. Absolutely loved everything that she had to say. Beth, what do you think?
I think it was amazing. We touched on the problems with Marxism, communism, and how to use reading to
Yeah,
grow your family. Absolutely loved it. It was so
yeah.
good.
I wish it could have went longer. Honestly, that was a great conversation.
Was.
If you could just give us a little bit about yourself and kind of the Peaceful Press, and this for anyone that doesn't know who you are, what they should know.
For sure. I love that. Thanks for having me on this show. I'm so honored to be here. I am Jennifer Pepito. I'm the founder of the Peaceful Press and the Restoration Home community. I've been a homeschooling mom for 7 years. My oldest daughter is 32. And my second child had some learning disabilities. So, in the midst of researching what could help her and how we could really bless her and give her the skills that she needed, we I read a lot of books on child development, books by people like Jane Healy and Carol Stock Kranowitz and John Taylor Gatto. And as I was reading, I recognized that a lot of the resources that were available for homeschool children, for all children really, were lacking in some of the motor skills that are actually essential for brain development. I think we see this even more. So many more kids are dealing with neurodiversity or being somewhere on the spectrum. And even regular kids who are maybe on screens too much in early childhood, or maybe their homes are a little bit under stimulating, need more motor skills going into school. They don't need the ABCs and math in preschool or kindergarten. And in the Peaceful Preschool, which is our kind of flagship program, we do teach them the letters of the alphabet in a very playful, fun way. We do teach them counting to 100 in a playful, fun way. But even more importantly, in my resources, we incorporate these motor skills, which really help with brain coordination. And then as children get into the regular school years, we talk a lot about virtue and heroic books. So this is kind of what got me started, though, was just needing to meet the needs of my own homeschooled children and recognizing that there wasn't the resources that I wanted out there.
So, how old are your kids now?
The oldest is 32 and the youngest is 17. So I'm on my last year.
Wow.
Yeah, my son, who's 17, is going to be graduating in like the next year or so. And it's so my job is almost done. It's kind of sad. It's very
Oh,
sad.
geez. Well, it looks like you're helping other people along their journey now, so that's all right.
Yeah, I love homeschooling. I think it's such a powerful way of transferring our values to our children and giving them a great education.
It's exactly what we need right now, and I wish more people were doing it. If you could kind of go into how do you if a parent's homeschooling, they want to understand how to incorporate the motor skills and everything like that. What is some advice you have for them?
Yeah, I think they need to like stop looking at what the public schools are doing and comparing to that. Because a lot of parents are scared to homeschool because they think, oh, I can't do what the public schools are doing. Or, they see that the public school atmosphere is kind of nasty, is like destroying kids. Like I just saw Rob Schneider, he's a comedian. And I saw a clip of him saying, like in California, you can drop your son off in the morning and in the afternoon you pick up a girl. And it is a very intense atmosphere in the public schools because whether you live in like a nice small town in Tennessee or you live in a big city in California, most of these educators have been educated by the same people. And so I know there are Christian educators, but still it's not a Christian atmosphere. And so it is intense for our kids to navigate like all that peer pressure and all the ungodly influences. I don't even know if this is a Christian podcast, but here I go. But when you pull them home to homeschool them, don't try to copy a failing system. Like they barely read any good books in school. My son actually has been in a kind of a hybrid program in a sense, so it is overseen in his junior senior year here by a state school. So it's like a lot of Christian administrators, but they're using the public school curriculum. And I know that these administrators are like Christians, conservative, would probably be choosing like the slightly less offensive versions of books that are allowed to them. And it's still total communist propaganda. Like the economics book says that that people wanted the government to be their protector and provider. And that's why the government is no longer the limited government it was supposed to be by our founding fathers. And so they
That's
aren't
not. that's not even the no. Well, yeah, sorry to cut you off, by the way, but anyway, that is not the way it's designed to be. You know what I mean? It's just like,
I know that, and you know that, but most kids coming out of public school do not
you
know
know,
that because they don't have a parent at home talking about, how much communist propaganda is in these textbooks. And so, there are so if you research education, you can see John Taylor Gatto said that all that your child needs for success in high school can be learned in only 2 or 3 weeks of formal skill study. So in kindergarten, in preschool, instead of trying to teach your child to read even necessarily, like we teach our children their letter sounds, but there's a lot of play involved. A lot of kids in kindergarten, preschool, their motor skills are not yet developed for them to be writing sentences. They should be baking, they should be pouring, they should be playing in the mud, all these kinds of motor skills that help their brain develop. That's what should be happening in the early years. But so many parents, they bring their kids home from school panicked, and then they think, oh, let's just copy the public schools. And I have a book coming out this summer that's going to help with that because the public schools have not been around very long. They actually have a pretty poor track record for developing genius. Some of the, even some of the like the tech founders did not go through public schools. A lot of them actually went through a Montessori education, which is more geared towards training children to be independent workers and independent thinkers in a sense.
and Beth, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure we did an interview with a individual, and they said that at those schools that they don't even really start stressing the reading until the grown-up teeth start coming in. You know
Yes,
what I
yes,
mean? So
someone said
they're
that. I forget
more
who.
about being involved, like you, like just saying, like get moving, get using your skills, and then also surrounding them around it, but don't stress it until that time. So I don't know what you think about that, but it seems like it kind of aligns with what you're saying.
For sure, that I think that would probably be Waldorf schools and even the Finnish schools. And so,
Is that
like
what
in the
it is?
Peaceful Press,
Yeah.
we spend a lot of time reading out loud to our children because even if
Mhm.
your child ends up reading a little bit later, if you've been reading out loud to them, then they're going to have that virtuous imagination and the
Yeah.
beautiful vocabulary, and they're going to have heard stories of heroes that will help them have an imagination for heroism. But
Mhm.
if you spend all those early years having them work in workbooks for hours a day, and even some of the popular homeschool curriculum is very much modeled after a public school curriculum. So your child is sitting there doing tedious workbook pages, and maybe now it has some Bible verses or some colorful pictures or something, but they're still sitting there for longer than they need to write, copying and writing and reading little bits of text. Instead, you could be reading them, chapters of Little House on the Prairie, and they see how Laura and her sisters obeyed their parents, or how they navigated the
Mhm.
hardships of the locust swarm, and reading that, and then your children are like drawing a picture or talking to you about it, or they are writing a little story of their own about it, writing like a day in the life. And so it's so much more fun for children to homeschool in this not, it's called the Charlotte Mason method, but so much more fun to homeschool in this more natural way. And they learn more deeply because the information gets in, it sticks, as opposed to with a workbook, it like goes in and out the other ear.
Real quick, I'm gonna move outside because I know you can't hear the music, but it is blaring my ears real fast. So, all right. So the Charlotte Mason and all this. How did you come about? I know you said it was like you're helping your other son, but like, what made you to really embody it, start living it? Was it because you saw the difference it made in your son's life, or was it just something that you started researching and you fell into?
Yeah, when I was a mom, I think my oldest child was somewhere between 3 and 5 years old. I feel like she was three. I feel like there was a lot of kind of feelings that I had about being the youngest mom there, and like, am I allowed to be here yet? My daughter's not even school age, but I went to a book club for a book called The Charlotte Mason Companion by Karen Andriola.
Okay.
And it was a very like kind of easy entry book about the Charlotte Mason method, and just talked about the beauty of nature study and reading out loud with our children and having poetry time and looking at art together. And that made me so excited to think about homeschooling being not so much like this rigid workbook style thing, but actually me and my children exploring the things I already love together. Like, I love being in nature, I love art, I love poetry, I love beautiful stories, and that there was a whole educational framework based on the things that I already loved doing. And so it was an easy transition to, uh, to go from like, okay, here's some workbooks I could do. Oh my gosh, these are so tedious. These take so long. Even, I started using something called Rod and Staff, and I still love their readers, and a lot of people love their math. But like their reading comprehension was so tedious. In second grade, my daughter was having to write many, many sentences just to answer these. It might have even been first grade to answer these reading comprehension questions, which we could have just talked about and then drawn a picture, written a little story, and been done. And
Yep.
also then had some time for creativity, because the problem is when you over schedule your children's time. I think sometimes people are like, oh, the Peaceful Press only took me a few hours. Am I doing enough school? When you overschedule, your children have no time to develop their own genius. When you look at the lives of people in history who are homeschooled, Leonardo da Vinci, Elizabeth Gouge, Joan of Arc, these people had time to think. They had time to listen to God. They had time to process what was happening around them and time to pursue their interests, which is a big part of what led to genius in them.
Yeah. And also, I feel like when they're at that age and they're able to take in more from the imagination approach and really grow, I feel like they have to be developing like synapses in their brains that are just allowing their brain to grow compared to being always so, am I good at this? Am I bad at this? Am I getting this? Am I not getting this? It allows them kind of just to evolve as a human rather than be so structured, I guess. Um,
Absolutely.
and also to go back to what you said about they're mimicking the traditional school. However, you can look at all the data and see that the traditional school model is failing. You know what I mean? Why are we going to mimic something that's failing, like you said earlier? But talk to the parents more or less about why they shouldn't be trying to either have limiting beliefs around how they're going to do it. Do they have to do it this way? And more about like, hey, look, this is like a journey you guys are going on. You're developing this human being. What are like some things you can give them to the parent that's maybe just started and still in that like little phase of, hey, I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm gonna try to copy this a little bit. Even the parents that maybe are considering jumping into it, and so they can start day one of just going about it their own way.
Yeah. For one thing, I love that you mentioned that this is a journey we're on, because I think that is the life of faith, that it's not so much like pass fail. Same with
Mm-hmm.
homeschooling. It's a journey you're on. And if you read the book Educated by Tara Westover, which is a very like negative look at family life and is supposed to be this big expose on homeschooling, but she had almost zero formal education and still put herself through Cambridge, I think it is. And
No
so,
way.
recognizing that it was one of the Ivy League schools, but recognizing that, wow, people who didn't even really have formal education are still able to get themselves educated. Maybe I should start focusing a little bit more on what's important to us as a family. And in the Peaceful
Mm,
Press, we have a lot of resources for helping you develop a family vision, for instance, or
I love that. I love
developing a
that.
homeschool mission statement. We, in the Restoration Home community, we just read the Legacy Life book by David Green, who's the CEO of Hobby Lobby, and he really helps us in our group. He helped us develop, some statements like, what do I want my children to remember about life in my home?
Mm,
What is really important to us as a family? Because if you know that, then you can stop, get off the like rat race of giving your children all separate workbooks, so then you have to grade all these separate workbooks, and instead gather your children, read out
yep.
loud for an hour in the morning and talk about what you read. Then, combine math grades. Like if you have five children, have two math classes. You look at the old time schoolhouses; they had everybody in math in the same schoolhouse, and some kids were working ahead of others.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some of your kids are going to get done a little faster, but if all the learning necessary for success in high school can be taught in 2 or 3 years of formal skill study, when your children are ready for formal math, which is actually more like 8 to 10 years old, not 5 to 7 years old, then the it's going to click so much faster. Like they're going to understand double digit multiplication, or what an integer is, a lot easier when there's a little bit of development that's already happened. And so making sure that you are taking the time, and then that's part of the beauty of combining ages, is you could take a little longer teaching a math concept if you were doing it twice in a day instead of say four times. If you combined similar ages, because once they get to high school, there are, multiple different math classes they could take, but they could be done with all their math if you track them fast instead of like combining some grades. They could be done with all their math in ninth grade if they wanted
Mhm.
to. And so just thinking about, hey, what is our family vision? What is important to us as a family? And how can we simplify some of the schooling so that we can go a little deeper and have less stress? Because I think one of the biggest hindrances to homeschool families is mama's own fear and anxiety. I wrote a whole book called Mothering by the Book about some of the fears that we face as moms and the way they steal joy from our children. Because when we are stressed and we're like, how am I going to do all this homeschooling? And what if my kids fall behind? And what if we're not keeping up? Our kids feel that and it robs the joy. And actually, joy is one of those emotions that helps learning happen. It's like when we're afraid, our brain goes into fight or flight or
Yep.
fawn or
Yep.
freeze. It's hard
Hmm.
for us to get anything done. It's hard for us to even think straight. Like a child who is scared is not going to be able to learn their ABCs. And so if you as a mom is so stressed about it and you're like, why can't you remember this? They're not going to be able to remember either. And so you got to keep the atmosphere as calm as you can. I know that's hard sometimes, but just doing your best to take care of your own mental health, pray, take time in nature, but also have reasonable expectations for you and your children, recognizing that education is a lifelong journey. If they
Hmm.
don't learn it in first or second grade, they'll probably learn it in third grade. Don't be
Yep.
so panicked all the time.
And to go back to what you're saying too, even if they can understand that, even having that, you're not going to be able to operate like you said when you're in fight or flight. You're not going to make good decisions. You're not as good as decisions as you can. But I feel like it's also going to allow them to not have the stress, but to also really activate their creativity and their parenting. No one knows their kid better than the parent. You know what I mean? So if they're in that creativity, not stressed out, just being there, I feel like they can be a better educator than they could if they're in the fight or flight. And I feel like when it comes to the moms, I think that there's more stress in overall from society about your kid's performance than it is to when it comes to the dads. You know what I mean? I think personally it should be 50-50. You know what I mean? But I feel like societal pressures. So maybe the moms are like feeling that and it's totally understandable. But there's got to be something that they can do where they understand, like, hey, this is, like you said, it's a journey. And I may make some wrong decisions, but I'm going to make a lot of right ones at the same time.
Absolutely. I think that, the more you understand education, I think the more confident you can be. And that's what I hope my book that comes out this summer is going to help families with, is just recognizing, oh, wow, like homeschooling isn't a new thing. It's been done throughout history and with really good results. And
Mm-hmm.
so I can take a deep breath and just start to enjoy this journey a little bit more instead of feeling so much pressure.
Okay, so if you could now kind of give us like a rundown of how everything kind of works within the curriculum a little bit, maybe a little bit deeper. And then also, I saw on the website it said you have like a holistic approach. Could you kind of maybe talk about that as well?
Yeah, for sure. So a typical day in our homeschool would have been, and I have 7 children. So at one time I might have been homeschooling 6, like probably a baby was not in school by the time the oldest graduated, for instance. But, I would have gathered my children in the morning, probably around 9 o'clock in the morning. We would read books together. So we call this morning time, and it's based on that Charlotte Mason method. And we we would like read a couple chapters in a book. We'd read the Bible together. I might read from several different kinds of books. Like I might have been reading something from history and something from science or art, or I might have been reading a document or some founding fathers words in that morning time. And so that's how the Peaceful Press is laid out, is that it'll tell you a chapter to read in a Bible or devotional book, a chapter to read in literature, and then a history or science book. And we loop history, science, art, and nature studies. So we don't do that every day. We'll like do history twice a week and science twice a week and then nature study once a week. and art once a week. And then the way that so then we'd get through that, and then we'd have an hour or so of language arts where my kids would be maybe copying or writing. We didn't start teaching grammar really until fourth grade. So in the early years, there'd be a lot of time spent on spelling or just copying sentences that were written beautifully by other writers, or
Mm,
maybe even writing their own words. And then from fourth grade and up, we might have done a little bit of Institute for Excellence in Writing. I really love their model for just helping children learn how to summarize a text, which is an important skill for college. And so we might have done one day some of that, and another day maybe a page of easy grammar or daily gram, something like that. I know you guys, I can see you guys have used some of the same resources that I use. And then in the afternoons, often we would have, we might have choir, or we might have a co-op, or we might be looking at art, or I might have just been letting my kids do their own thing. Or we might have been working in our garden. We spent a lot of time as a family working together, whether it was stacking wood or planting a garden or baking together. And that's part of the holistic aspect of the Peaceful Press, is that we recognize that our children are not just a brain, they're also a body and a soul. And so, taking time to be quiet in our homeschool so our kids can listen to God, taking time to go outside and look at the birds and just like experience the beauty of creation. Let that help regulate our
mm,
physical bodies. Taking time to just, bake or walk or look at art. All of these are part of the development of our child. When a child is baking or folding clothes, it takes great brain power to categorize the socks with the right socks, or to, read a recipe and comprehend what comes next. And so I think sometimes parents dismiss those extracurricular activities, or in other cases, sometimes maybe over emphasize like the practical work. But I think having a balance of academic work and practical skills really helps develop a whole child. I'm sure you guys could attest to that as homeschool graduates, that your life was probably not just book work, and the other things you did help develop you as a person and also help develop your interests. Like, if we don't let our children experience anything besides book work, it's hard for them to decide what they're going to do as adults. And AI is changing so much. It's really important to start cultivating our own interests. Like, you as a mom, your interests matter in your family, and your children's interests matter. And so having some open space in your day, my son at one point wrote a book, hammered out copper jewelry. They did some bushcraft, building like a fortress or like some kind of a fort in the backyard that I barely saw what was happening back there. They had time to pursue their own interests, and that was a big part of them becoming adults who were full of life still. Like, I think so many people graduate from high school or
yep.
college and they're so burned out. They go into a 9 to 5 and they really have no life outside of work. But my kids have been able to develop, they surf and they climb and they, race motorcycles, hopefully not forever. They do things. They're very interesting people because they had a very interesting childhood.
No, and also, I mean, I can look back at my own experience with my brother, and like, so we would spend all day outside, even kind of all the way through, like even me going through high school. You know what I mean? Like, we would spend pretty much all day outside, and then we would either do school like kind of in the morning. My mom woke us up at 7:30 to go for a run. You know what I mean? So that was like we were up. We'd either go, and she would give us an option to go play or do your school, but this has to be done by this time. You know what I mean? Or we just bang it out at night. And sometimes, honestly, I mean, it seems like it's mad that I say this, but we would get like a couple weeks behind, and then we would just lock in and just get it all done. And I feel like it allows you to look at learning from like a different perspective rather than thinking of it as so like it's when we would jump into it, we'd be fully focused, like all about it, getting it done. Like, this is the mission. But it also allowed us to have, like you're talking about, the other side where we're in the world, we're playing. That's what I think childhood really should be about. You know what I mean? And developing skills along the way that are going to help you as an adult.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
I love this
so
conversation, David and Bethany, because I have moms in my community group right now who are getting ready to homeschool their kids through high school. And there
mm,
there does start to be a lot of fear, like, oh my gosh, it's high school. Now I've
yep,
really got to get serious. And, admittedly, in my family, we did not raise like math geniuses. Math was never my strong suit. With my youngest son, we've, gotten more like tutoring, and we've incorporated more like some help like that because math is not my strong suit.
Hmm.
And often our homeschools will reflect like the strong suit of the parents. And yet, you're like, I have a child who is a Juris Doctor, is studying to take the bar now in something very intense, like cryptocurrency regulation. I have a
That's
child
crazy.
yeah, children who have gone to college, graduated summa cum laude. Yeah, kids who have graduated and then scored really high on the ASVAB. So whatever your children want to do, you can equip them for.
Hmm.
And if it is like math or science or engineering, just maybe get a tutor a little bit
Yep.
earlier, or maybe play in that area. But often our children also follow our interests, and so if there's an interest you want your kids to have, then you should have it. But I love that your mom, gave you guys a little bit of freedom, which is probably part of the confidence that you both have to start a business and
Hmm.
to like podcast with people. I mean, that takes a lot of confidence, and a lot of kids, a lot of normal kids who didn't have any freedom or independence or interest-led learning throughout their homeschool years or throughout their school years aren't going to have the confidence to step out of the box and do something like that.
Yeah. And it's really, I think it comes down to also, you know, when you're homeschooled, you're not going through the same societal pressures that a developing brain is going to be dealing with. Societal pressures exist and we should obviously know how to handle them as individuals. But I think it also allows us when we step into adulthood to operate kind of more of a sense of like, what can I do rather than these are my limitations. I don't know if I'm making myself clear here or not. But I think that is something else that homeschooling does for like kids, because even through high school, at a high school age kid, if your kid's passionate about something, a subject, an interest, there's YouTube University. You can literally go on there and learn about anything you want. You know what I mean? And high school age kids, I mean, at least me and my friends growing up, like you're at that age, you're like, okay, like what am I gonna do? What am I interested in? Let me like learn about. You're enjoying it, and they can dive in. So it doesn't have to be like even if you're not good at it, you still have access to a free tool, and then there's plenty of other free tools, whatever they're interested in, or paid ones. That can get them set up for life better than you could have ever done yourself. You
It's
know?
so true. And that's why it's almost a moot point. Like for me to say homeschooling is better than public school is almost a moot point because public school is mostly starting to do online education, which is another bad thing for kids, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was bad for kids to be in public school classrooms and have to sit in a seat all day and listen to somebody drone on and then work in workbooks.
Yep.
But this is worse. Like for kids to just be on screens all day, and homeschooling is not screen schooling. Like I
Nope.
understand pulling in an online class here and there, or an online, I understand using some tools, but if you're not doing some real life eye to eye conversations with your kids and real life hands on projects, they are missing out. Like it is not the same to just operate on a screen all day as it is to learn with somebody and go outside and play in the dirt and take a walk and bake a loaf of bread. Like it's not the same. So you can screen school all you want, but it's not going to have the same outcome of kids who really think and experience the world and are very regulated emotionally as traditional homeschooling can do.
I think you and my mom would hit it off like crazy. Now, I will say, because her biggest regret is that we did virtual school while we were growing up. That's her number one homeschooling regret. And she's like, I wish I knew now, because she was a public school teacher for 10 years beforehand. So she came from the method of like, okay, I can do this, but I'll be able to help them in every single one. She's like, right now, I wish I could go back and tell myself that I didn't do that. But and still, even with what we did, like she still made it such a priority of us being outside. Screen time was for school. That was it. But you can look at the studies. Like kids learn better with textbooks. They learn better. They do not do as well with screens. And I don't know if you're short on time, by the way. We can wrap this up whenever you want. I don't want you to be late for another meeting if you have something.
Yeah, I have another 10 or 15 minutes. So, but
Okay.
I love what you said. And it's like, if you, for you guys, like the fact that your mom also made time for you guys to pursue your other interests is so important. And I think like, if you're a mom and you're like, I can't teach math, I need to do screen math. Totally. I did teaching textbooks
Mm-hmm.
for math for a lot of my kids. And maybe I should have done something even more like a tutor on the screen. But I do understand using a screen for some subjects.
Yep.
What really breaks my heart though is a family using screen-based learning for history. History should be you guys reading books together and talking about what's going on in the world and what happened in the world and why we shouldn't repeat it. Like reading books, I've read books about the Chinese communists and how they were
Yep.
like professors and they were going to school in America and they went back to help with communism. Then the communists put them in prison. You know what I mean? Like I've
Yes.
read those books, so when it's happening in America, I can spot it.
Yeah.
We've
Exactly.
read like A Day
Exactly.
in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, and we've read Ayn Rand, and we've read just a broad variety of books. And when you read those history books, when you read like Up from Slavery, you read those books, it gives you a totally different perspective on what is true and
Yes.
what is false.
Mm,
And it gives
yes.
you insight. Like when you see Marxism being introduced to people today, a system that has killed millions of people around
Hmm.
the world, you're
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
dumb about it. You know what I mean? It's like, it's
Yeah.
shocking that people are so badly educated. They would copy a system, even Christians. It's like so infiltrated the
Mm,
church. They'll copy a
mm,
system that has murdered millions around the world, including the people who tried to make it happen. And so I think, yes, there are screens. There's a time and a place for them, but it shouldn't be all your subjects. It should definitely not be subjects that require like a passionate, like you as a
yeah.
mom, start getting excited about learning yourself and your kids will get excited. Like, and if history's not your thing, that's fine. There's so many good audiobooks. You could listen to audiobooks while you're doing needlepoint or baking or whatever it is. There are other ways to get to that core knowledge. And so it's like on the one hand, homeschool according to your interests. On the other hand, make sure you're giving your children a core of like Western civilization so they understand
Yeah.
when they see the world like falling into paganism that this is not how it was supposed to be. Read books like The Rule of Saint Benedict, or read books like, Atlas Shrugged, or
Hmm.
Mm,
even books like Louis Zamperini, his biography, The Devil at My Heels, and just recognizing the way that a resilient person lives and the way that God encountered his heart. Like there's so much hope in books like that for our children that a textbook can never meet.
No, and I would go as far as to say is it's your civic duty to introduce those books to your kid
mm,
because like you said, in the world we live in, people are so blind to something that's laid out and there's if you look at the education system, they lean that way. Like, it's not like you can't even really blame them for preaching what they believe in. You know what I mean? They say this is what they believe in. Well, that's not what we're about. I want you before we go, I only got 10 minutes, but I want you to just kind of go a little bit deeper because I'm loving what you're saying on books parents can read with their kids that are going to give them education about what you're talking about. You know what I
And
mean?
can I just piggyback on that, David, real quick? I just wanted to say I'm seeing a lot of statistics on fourth graders are not reading adequately, and literacy rates are continuing to drop. So if I would be curious to how, like what books, like what David was saying, you would recommend, and then how like this literacy crisis ties into that.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting? I don't think it has to be these heavy books like it would be cool if your children read like Thomas Jefferson's original works. It'd be really cool if they read that. It would be cool if they read like Leviathan. Like there are some of these books that are great books that should be read. But even reading, for instance, the Little House on the Prairie series. Like in the Little House on the Prairie series, the mom and dad were suffering. Like they went through real hardships and yet they still did not identify as victims. They still, at the end of losing everything to a locust swarm, they still were thankful to God. They praised God. We read the Little Britches series out loud, and in all of the books, they go through these terrible hardships, and yet at the end of the book, they praise God. They are acknowledge the goodness of God. Like at the end of, we just read Man of the Family as our book club in our community, and the mom, she's a new widow. She's trying to keep her family together. The kids are all out working really hard to help contribute to the family income. And nobody is saying, the rich people owe me something. And why doesn't that man with all the cherry trees just give me his stuff? That is not the
Mhm.
story. And,
Mhm.
and, but if it was a modern book, the story would be that they would, they would petition him and his house would burn down and he'd give them all his stuff. Like modern literature for children is in so many cases already infiltrated with Marxism. And so the
Mm,
stories that children are reading is already like, oh, this poor girl, she had to go to work and she couldn't go to school, and then
mm-hmm,
the
mm-hmm.
rich person took everything that she had left away. You know, even like a book. I didn't read all of it, but it was like a newer book by Barbara Kingsolver. It was supposed to be Demon Copperhead. That's what it's called, and
Oh
it was
yeah.
supposed to be like, I don't know what her point was, but it was, you can pick out Marxist books because the men are often bad, the rich people are bad, and there's never a happy ending. Like the
Mm,
Grapes of Wrath, right there, like perfect communist propaganda, like no happy ending.
Mm,
But read a book like Rising Esperanza, which is actually a newer book, and in that book, she works hard. She loves her family. Like it's actually a really
yes.
positive book, and so I think it doesn't have to necessarily be these big hard books. Although at some point, like one of my favorite books for education is actually called Hero Education for high school. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that. It's
no.
Oliver DeMille who came up with like Thomas Jefferson education, and in it he kind of lists like the 100 books that you should read, and we have some blog posts like that on the Peaceful Press. Um, but like in one of his lists, he has you reading like Little House in the Big Woods, Pollyanna,
Mm,
um, The Five Love Languages by Chapman, and then Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream, and the book Rascal. Like it doesn't have to be, and then but then there's another list later on that's like The Law by Bastiat and Thomas Jefferson um, works. So it's like there it doesn't have to be all hard books, but it should be hopeful books. It should be books where there are heroes. One of our favorite family stories is Ernest Shackleton, The Endurance, and there's a couple different versions. One by F.A. Worsling, who was actually one of the members of the expedition, and there's another one by Alfred Lansing. And so Shackleton was like a South America, he was trying to cross the Antarctic, and his ship sunk and they were stranded on the ice. And so this is incredible survival story and also an incredible leadership story, and the kinds of heroes that our children need, like people who keep going even when they don't feel like it, people who aren't waiting for someone else to bail them out or blaming someone else for their problems.
Mm,
And so I think that it doesn't have to be, and if you the Peaceful Press has a master book list that is free, that has all of the books that we recommend from like preschool through middle school. And
love
so
that.
that would be a great list to grab. I can give you a link to share with
Yeah,
your
send that,
That would be
listeners,
please.
great.
because it's not just, it happens in early childhood. It happens with the picture books that we're reading, that we're reading books where
Hmm.
you see hard work rewarded, where you see people trust in God even through hard times, where you see people don't identify as a victim.
Mm,
And those kinds of stories will inspire our children, that they too can be heroes, that they too can make a difference in the world. They don't have to wait
yep.
for someone else to help them.
I love that. I love that. I know we're crunched on time right now, so thank you so much for coming out. I've thoroughly
Yes.
enjoyed this conversation with you. Um, if you could just tell people real quick before we go, where can they find everything, the socials, the websites, and all that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. The peacefulpress.com is where you can find my free homeschool curriculum, free how to get started guide, and as well as our homeschool bundles that can help guide you through middle school in your
Mm,
homeschool. And then also the Restoration Home Community opens 4 times a year, and this is my mom mentorship program. We're reading some of the books that I mentioned this year. We just read Man of the Family. This month we're reading Tending the Heart of Virtue, about reading aloud with our children. We read The Legacy Life in January, so we have beautiful books that we're reading together this year, and then just encouraging moms to develop better habits, simple life-giving habits for a more peaceful home.
Mhm. That's
and I
great.
love that. Okay, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you
Thanks.
very much.
Thanks
All
for
right,
having me. It was really fun to talk to you, and yeah, the Lord bless your endeavors. I love seeing like homeschool adults be innovative and really kind of help the next generation. So good job.
well, hopefully, if everything goes right with everything you're doing, we're doing, there'll be a lot more of us than there is now because the numbers keep going up. So, I mean, I think it's honestly what our country needs right now.
Yeah.
It is what our country needs to set us up to where we need to be. And thank you again. I mean, I really appreciate you guys coming on.